Thank you. Could I ask those who are leaving the chamber to please do so quickly and quietly, as we will now move on to the final item of business. And the final item of business this evening is a members' business debate on motion 19557 in the name of Pam Duncan-Glancy on International Day of Persons with Disabilities. This debate will be concluded without any questions being put, and I would invite those members who would wish to speak in the debate to please press the request to speak buttons, and I call on Pam Duncan-Glancy to open the debate. Up to 7 minutes, please.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer, and I'm honoured to host today's members' debate, an opportunity for Parliament to come together to mark the International Day of Disabled People, which takes place tomorrow, the 3rd of December. I welcome members' support for the motion, and I look forward to hearing all contributions. International Day of Disabled People is a global day of observance, first proclaimed by the UN General Assembly in 1992, to promote the rights and well-being of disabled people across all aspects of life. Since then, significant progress has been made, with many countries bringing positive change to laws and policies and actions in numerous areas, including accessibility in public spaces, public transport and buildings, enhanced digital accessibility, inclusive education and workplace practices, and greater representation of disabled people in public life, recognising that there should be nothing about disabled people without disabled people, including in legislators. And, Presiding Officer, on that, I think it's incumbent on me to say that, whilst I may be the first permanent wheelchair user elected to this place, I think it is incumbent on me and on all of us to ensure that I am not the last. One way that we in this room can do that is to empower the next generation of disabled people and to, as this year's International Day theme says, foster disability-inclusive societies for advancing social progress. In our own way, in this chamber and here in Scotland, we've advanced social progress this term. One such way we have done that is, for the first time ever, the Presiding Officer, on behalf of Parliament, hosted a summit for disabled people to mark International Day, and I thank her for that leadership. And today, our Parliament has announced that we'll do it again, this time with a future focus. This year's summit will be an opportunity for disabled people to set out what action they want to see taken in the next Parliament. The summit will be held on the 21st of February, and to keep it future-focused, whilst a group of cross-party MSPs will co-chair each session in it, it will be co-chaired with young disabled people from across Scotland, young leaders who are incredible in the work that they do. And those young people have joined us tonight in the gallery. I welcome you to your Parliament, and I say to you that when I was your age, that this place could be for people like us felt like a pipe dream. Yet here I am, here we are. This place is for you, this place is for people like us. But, Presiding Officer, whilst there is much to celebrate, and celebrate we will, there is much still to do. Significant challenges remain. Tens of thousands continue to face barriers in every aspect of life, in employment, in education, in transport and in access to public services. In 2024, only 51%, that's just over half, of disabled people were in employment, compared with 83% of non-disabled people. Being locked out of work doesn't happen overnight. It is the consequence of systemic barriers over a lifetime. While some disabled people are unable to work, we also know that with the right support and structures in place, many can thrive in the workplace, want to be in the workplace and contribute significantly to Scotland, our communities and our economy. Glasgow Centre for Inclusive Living's Equality Academy is an incredible example of helping to make this happen. The organisation in my region of Glasgow runs an internship programme providing placements for disabled graduates, mainly in the NHS in Scotland. The programme supports disabled people to unlock their potential and has an 88% success rate for getting people into employment. I'd challenge any government to show us a programme that replicates that level of success, and I'd welcome any member to Glasgow to visit and see it in action. Presiding Officer, the employment gap must close, but for that to happen, as well as action in employability, we need action in other areas too, like in education. While many people support the presumption of mainstream, including me, the reality is that the policy is not being implemented as intended and is leaving young people in school without the support they need. We can't let this go on, and we must restore support and thus restore faith in mainstream provision to deliver the ambition of inclusion in deeds, not just in words. And then, of course, there's getting to work or school or anywhere at all, indeed. For so many disabled people, that can be really, really difficult. Glasgow's subway, for example, remains largely inaccessible. My husband and I can't travel together by bus because most services accommodate only one wheelchair, which I think could be a bit of a policy choice rather than a design one, given that the difference in other countries is that more than one person in a wheelchair can travel. And when we use accessible taxis to get around, disabled people face long waits because there are very few taxis available, given the result of some policy decisions that can make it difficult for taxi drivers to remain in business. Many buildings remain inaccessible too, Presiding Officer, and worryingly, some accessible toilets are still frequently kept locked to the public, leaving disabled people having to find someone and ask permission to use the toilet. Thousands of disabled people, as we know, are stuck on social care and NHS waiting lists as well. Take arthritis and other musculoskeletal conditions, for example, conditions that affect around 1.7 million people in Scotland. These conditions are amongst the biggest causes of persistent pain, disability and working days lost, and will remain so over the next 20 years. Yet essential healthcare, like hip and knee replacements, account for nearly a third of all waits for planned operations, and there is no dedicated discernible plan to address this. That's something that the cross-party group on arthritis and musculoskeletal conditions are working hard to address. It's clear there's still a long way to go to ensure disabled people are able to realise our human rights. But, Presiding Officer, colleagues, friends and visitors in the gallery, I have hope for 3 reasons. Firstly, because of disabled people's organisations, advocacy groups and charities across Scotland who campaign for equality and human rights every day. I say to them, thank you. The impact of your work cannot be underestimated. And I'd like to take a moment to mention a giant of that movement, Etienne d'Abbeville, who we lost in October this year. Etienne was a force of nature, a passionate and diligent campaigner who changed my life and that of thousands of others, and I and many miss him. Secondly, I have hope because there are incredible disabled people in Scotland who are innovative by design. Even just getting out of bed needs innovation for some. It will be that innovation that delivers our emancipation. And lastly, Presiding Officer, I have hope because, as this year's theme highlights, when societies work together and remove barriers and create equal opportunities, everyone benefits. That is demonstrated by the tremendous contribution that disabled people make to Scotland, to our communities, to our economy, our culture and our public life every day, and is embodied in the work that they do. For that, and because I believe we all know the weight of responsibility to leave the world a better place, I believe we can and will advance social progress for disabled people together. Thank you, Presiding Officer.
Thank you, Ms Duncan-Glancy. We now move to the open debate. Backbench speeches of up to 4 minutes. I call Karen Adam to be followed by Alexandra Stewart. Ms Adam.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I congratulate Pam Duncan-Glancy on securing this members' business debate, marking the International Day of Persons with Disabilities. The theme this year being Fostering Disability-Inclusive Societies for Advancing Social Progress. That theme recognises something very simple, that when we remove barriers and create equal opportunities, we do not just help disabled people, we strengthen our whole society. And for me, this is not just abstract. I grew up as a child of a deaf adult, a coda, and from a very young age I was painfully aware that the world was not set up for people like my dad, who's deaf. I watched bank staff, officials and people in professional positions speak over him and treat him like he was a child without capacity, simply because he could not hear. Decisions were made around him instead of with him, and that was not about his abilities. It was about other people's assumptions and ignorance, and it was degrading. Now, as a mum of neurodivergent children with additional support needs, I see those patterns in different ways. My children, like so many others, have too often been treated as problems to be fixed, as disruptors in classrooms that were never designed with them in mind in the first place. And children know. They know when they're being seen as an inconvenience. They sense that they do not belong in the very place where they should feel the safest. It does real harm to their confidence, their well-being and their education. The motion before us today recognises those everyday exclusions. It acknowledges that disabled people still face barriers in employment, education, transport and access to public services. And it rightly commends disabled people's contributions to our communities, our economy, our culture and our public life. And that contribution is immense, but too often it is made in spite of the system and not because of it. As a constituency MSP and as convener of the Equalities, Human Rights and Civil Justice Committee, I hear time and again that our world is not fit for purpose for many disabled people. We have a society where some of the best players are left on the bench, and not because they lack talent, but because the game is set at hard mode for disabled people. As the Scottish Human Rights Commission has reminded us, human rights need to be built into the way we design services from the very start, not patched on at the end when the damage is already done. I want to thank Pam for using her voice and her lived experience to challenge exclusionary structures and for bringing this motion to the Chamber. And I also want to thank the disabled people's organisations, advocacy groups and charities across Scotland who fight every single day for equality and human rights, often when navigating the very barriers that they are campaigning to remove. My hope and my commitment is for a Scotland where everyone can take part, whatever taking part means for them. For some, that will be employment, politics or public life, like Pam. For others, it will be living independently, travelling safely, learning in a classroom where they are understood and feel welcome, or simply being a part of their local community without facing a wall of barriers. All of those are equal and valid ambitions. So, to my disabled constituents and to disabled people across Scotland, I want to say this to you. You are not the problem. The problem is the world that has been built without you in mind. Let this International Day of Persons with Disabilities not just be a date in our diary, but a call to action that we answer with real, lasting, practical change. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Adam. I call Alexander Stewart to be followed by Karen Mockin. Mr Stewart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I'm pleased to speak in this evening's debate, and I thank Pam Duncan-Glancy for bringing this important issue to the Chamber. The International Day for Persons with Disability reminds us of our collective responsibility to uphold the rights, the dignity and the well-being of disabled people across all areas of life and all aspects of society. It is important that Pam acknowledges this day, and I congratulate Pam Duncan-Glancy and societies and groups and organisations who all play a part. And I'd also like to welcome the UN's chosen theme for this year, fostering disability inclusion societies and advancing social progress. Presiding Officer, this theme reflects the simple truth, which is that the whole of society benefits when we support disabled people to thrive by removing barriers and widening access for them. When engaging with organisations in my own region, including employment services, the third sector groups, it is clear just how those areas and how these organisations look at individuals with disabilities and how they contribute to our communities that they work in and they thrive in every day. Pam Duncan-Glancy's motion rightfully speaks about some of the challenges disabled people continue to face. These barriers include access to education, securing stable employment and public services which remain difficult for them to access. All of these challenges, employment remains one of the most significant, Presiding Officer. From 2013 to 2019, we saw positive change on this issue, and the proportion of disabled people in employment increasing from 43% to 54%. Despite some progress, we know that disability employment gap remains stubbornly high. Recent figures have shown that the rate of 53.1%, which is nearly 30% lower than for those who are non-disabled. We also know that disabled employment rates fell during the pandemic, and overall, the population of disabled people in employment hasn't really increased since 2019. So there is a lot of work to do for us to recognise the progress, but we have to ensure that much more work is done. We need to ensure that workplaces are genuinely inclusive, that disabled people have access to the correct support, and that employers are able to make any necessary adjustments for them to work. The previous UK government doubled the spending on access to work between 2016 and 2024. That helped deliver employment support for over 67,000 individuals in 23-24. Going forward, it's important that we see this continued commitment for disabled people where possible so that can be achieved. Presiding Officer, inclusion should not just be an aspiration. It should be an essential part of a fairer Scotland, which is something all of us want to see and achieve. Therefore, it's important that we ask the Scottish Government to continue to engage constructively with Parliament forthcoming Disabled Summit, and I look forward to seeing what can be achieved from that. The UK Government also has a role to play in this process, where the most aspects of equalities and employment still are reserved, so they have a role to play. But the UK Government's wide disability rights legislation remains robust. We have to ensure that it's effective, that governments work together to make employment practices more inclusive. Disabled people deserve a system that works for them across all parts of the United Kingdom and levels of government. So in conclusion, Presiding Officer, I hope that all sides of this chamber can work together to make this vision a reality, because for disabled people going forward, there's nothing more they want than for this Parliament to work with them and work for them to achieve the goals that they rightfully deserve. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Stewart. I now call Karen Mochan to be followed by Maggie Chapman. Ms Mochan.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and can I thank my colleague Pam Duncan-Glancy for bringing this important debate to the Chamber. And can I also say I am delighted I will be joining the Parliament's Disability Summit this year, mentioned in the motion, and I'm really looking forward to working with the young people who will be co-chairing the sessions. If I may, though, I want to start my contribution by talking a little bit about my colleague Pam Duncan-Glancy, who really is an inspiration to me, but I know to many others in this chamber. My colleague beside me has worked tirelessly throughout her career on this cause, and I know she will continue to fight for the rights and well-being of disabled people. If there's one thing I've learned about Pam Duncan-Glancy is that she has plenty of fight. Pam Duncan-Glancy and others, such as Karen Adams' father, have faced challenges and barriers that I cannot even imagine. She has shared them with us here in this chamber and across her community to ensure the voices of so many disabled people can be heard. She is so generous with her time on these issues and shows great determination to change the trajectory for every disabled person that she can. But what I must tell you is that over the 5 years in Parliament, I have realised Pam Duncan-Glancy is a great ally, a wonderful friend. She is very funny. And, Presiding Officer, I know I probably shouldn't say this, but we have had very many laughs and funny moments just sitting here in the chamber beside each other. But the point that I want to make is that Pam Duncan-Glancy is a very, very able parliamentarian. If we can bring more people with her experiences and background to Parliament, to professional jobs, to a whole variety of workplaces, we will have a far healthier and happier economy, society and public provision. I say that not just to talk up my friend, but to say to society, if we can change, if we can make changes, we will all benefit. Disabled people should be our friends, our neighbours, our work colleagues, and that would be of benefit to us all. Presiding Officer, despite knowing how valuable disabled people are to our society, we have heard from Alexander Stewart that disabled people in our society, the true picture is that they do face restrictions, their opportunities are often taken away. The employment rate for disabled people has been consistently lower than employment rate for non-disabled people. People who are recorded to have additional support needs are less likely to achieve the qualifications that they should. When they leave school, they are less likely to have a positive destination. And what we know is that poverty rates remain much higher amongst households where someone has a disability. And this is unacceptable, and we must continue to fight for this. The impact of the COVID-19 pandemic really demonstrated that if you have a disability, you are more likely to have inequalities exacerbated. People with disability have the right to work, to be part of our society, and it is incumbent on government to ensure the world of work is a welcoming and suitably adjusted environment. And the 2010 Equality Act offers a lot of offers protection for disabled people around workplace discrimination. But to ensure this happens, government must take this issue seriously. And I'm sure that we would hear from the Minister in our closing remarks just how we must continue to push to make sure that the Equality Act is covered. We must allocate resources and ensure education and workplace projects are properly funded. And we must see a much better representation of disabled people across society in our media, in our public services and in our representative bodies. By doing this, I hope other people will have the great privilege to meet great work colleagues and friends like we have here in Parliament in Pam Duncan-Glancy. Thank you, Presiding Officer.
Thank you, Ms Morgan. I call Michael Chapman to be followed by Jeremy Balfour. Ms Chapman.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and I'm grateful to Pam Duncan-Glancy for securing this debate. It is only right that we recognise the International Day of Persons with Disabilities in our Parliament. This evening, I will focus on social security, as it has the power to foster inclusive societies or to marginalise and exclude. The devolution of powers over disability benefits promised one of the most important developments in the rights of disabled people in the history of this Parliament. After years of cuts and austerity, years of successive UK governments stigmatising disabled people who require support, and years of policies forced through despite their concerns, this Parliament finally had the opportunity to do things differently, to show compassion, care and respect to disabled people. Respect is especially important. It's part of Social Security Scotland's strapline: dignity, fairness and respect. Yet, 3 years into the new system, I'm not sure we are fully delivering on that promise. After a promising start, we've seen huge falls in the success rates of those applying for adult disability payment. 54%, more than half, who applied for ADP have been rejected. In the most recent financial year, that's risen to 63%. It's now worse than PIP. And it's not just my analysis. The Institute for Fiscal Studies, the Scottish Fiscal Commission and the Independent Review of ADP all say the same thing. And what about the ambition to get decisions right the first time? In ADP's short history, almost 60,000 people have asked for a second opinion on their decision. It is positive that in about half of those cases, Social Security Scotland admits it was wrong and changes the decision. That's higher than elsewhere. But some people have to go all the way to court to get what they are owed. Over half of all claimants who go through the stress of appealing to the tribunal win their cases, having already gone through an internal review and been rejected for a second time. Too often, Social Security Scotland is not getting it right the first time or the second time. Instead, it's being forced by the courts to do the right thing and pay up. This is not dignified for disabled people. It's not fair or respectful either. Looking across the statistics, almost every measure is going in the wrong direction. More rejections, more appeals, fewer people getting the highest rates. What is going on? If there has been a deliberate shift in assessment practice, then we need to know, and the Scottish Government must be held accountable. I'd ask the Minister to address these concerns in closing, if she can. The independent review of ADP has now reported and made a range of helpful recommendations, like scrapping the 20-metre rule it inherited from PIP, which deliberately makes it harder for people with mobility needs to get support. It's also suggested a more automated system where people with particular conditions can access benefits without a full application. A social care package, receipt of the ILF or a blue badge could all confer automatic eligibility. And it's not just theoretical. After a trial by Transport Scotland, blue badges are now subject to a streamlined process for those with motor neuron disease, using a sign-off from an MND nurse. So it can be done. Data also shows that ADP uptake for BME communities is lower than average. Why is that? And what do we need to do to change it, to make it genuinely fair for everyone? When the Scottish Government responds to the review, I hope it grasps the opportunity to right the wrongs faced by too many disabled people in this country. And I hope that next year, when we again recognise this important day, we will have a better story to tell. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Chapman. I call Jeremy Balfour to be followed by Christine Graham. Mr Balfour.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. And can I, like others, congratulate Pam Duncan-Clancy for bringing forward this debate this afternoon. Thank you also for highlighting the summit that will happen in February. And it was a pleasure this afternoon to meet with some of the young people who are in the gallery, and I am sure the day will be a success. I have to say, I found Pam Duncan-Clancy's speech really quite uplifting, and perhaps will be the other side of the coin to what I want to say tonight. Because, Presiding Officer, this Parliament often talks about disability and accessibility. Yet the reality is that often it's full of hot words and very little action coming out of it. Let's look at what the political parties are doing or not doing on disabled issues. One party isn't even here to speak in this debate. The Scottish National Party, the Scottish Government, have done almost nothing to deal with the disability employment gap. We hear lots of warm words about how we need to get the gap down. We've heard that from speakers already tonight. But we know that the figure's not moved at all. And the question we have to ask, both of this government and the UK government, is actually, what are you doing to get the gap down, rather than talking about it? The government has been dragged its feet on Change in Place Toilets Fund. It's taken almost the full Parliament to see this fund come forward. And last week I held a meeting with about 15 disabled charities. I said to them, what is the one thing that you want to see happen? And the answer was, we want to see a manifesto commitment completed by the government, because we still haven't abolished non-residential social care charges. And I asked the Minister, will that happen before this Parliament comes to an end in the spring of next year? Or again, is it simply words on a bit of paper? And I can say gently, or not, maybe not so gently, to Scottish Labour, you need to speak to your colleagues down south as well. We all know that the health element of universal credit is still in the pipeline, and it will make it harder for disabled people. It's easy to come up with a cheap headline, as we did last week, in regard to the Motability Scheme, which will save not one penny of taxpayers' money, but simply moves them to mimic reform policies and go for the cheap headline. And can I say to my former colleagues on the left of me, or the only thing about on the left of me, is that look at your webpage. The last time you updated it on Social Security was September 2021. That's how seriously they take Social Security. From my dwelling within the party, we have no real understanding of how Social Security works. They have no policies coming forward for disabled people. But perhaps, Presiding Officer, the final thing to say is that earlier this year, this Parliament chose to deny disabled people the champion they deserve. A Disability Commissioner would have helped to reverse decades of neglect and drive meaningful change, change that would have transformed the lives of some of the most vulnerable people in our society. But this Parliament decided that a Disability Commissioner was one commissioner too many. A decision made just after weeks of passing legislation to create a commissioner for victims of witnesses, but not one for disability. Presiding Officer, the decision captures the attitude, I think, across this chamber. Parties are very good at talking the talk, but when it comes to action, disabled people are too often sidelined in favour of other priorities. And I don't think it's good enough. Disabled people deserve better. And while I welcome the Parliament's marking this International Day of Persons with Disabilities, I'm afraid it rings hollow with many disabled people, while parties continue to ignore us and ignore real change in our society. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Balfour. And I call Christine Graham.
Thank you very much, Deputy Presiding Officer. I congratulate Pam Duncan-Glancy in bringing this motion to Parliament for debate. And to put it mildly, she knows far more than I do of the difficulties for those with physical disabilities. Though she never lets her own circumstances in any way impinge on her contributions here, she is clever, articulate and a fearsome parliamentary adversary, but enough of that praise. Disabilities take many forms. We have had a debate last week on Tourette's, a much misunderstood disability. We've had members with hearing impairments, and latterly we had Dennis Robertson, who was blind. This place of work has tried to provide facilities to suit these individual needs, but even here, for example, accessing spaces in a wheelchair or, for me, a mobility scooter needs improvement. You can't travel from the public area to the garden lobby without accompaniment and using a lift. Doors have to be held open for you. The lift is small and hidden, though following Pam Duncan-Glancy, she has exposed hidden accessible routes, which I now use. I say now because until fairly recently I would not admit to being in a minor way disabled. It is minor, but it has opened my eyes to what others have had to accept in accessing places and transport. Some experiences have been annoying. Some kindly, some frankly hilarious. At least that was the best way to react. My mobility scooter is now regularly seen as I navigate the Parliament. However, in this world where a mobile phone must be scanned all the time, I find having to shout all the time to clear a pathway because my horn is sadly pathetic. When I was out recently with my walking stick, I found I had to step aside to let others pass, not the other way round. Yet, like others, pain is always my unwelcome companion. That lack of consideration makes me angry. Annoyance? Well, having to rely on others unnecessarily, for example, simply to pass through entrances. Doors here and elsewhere in public areas should open easily and comfortably for those with mobility aids. Lift doors should be timed to stay open long enough to enter safely. Able-bodied folk filling lifts when there is no need, leaving disabled to wait, is simply wrong. Then there was the experience of assisted passenger at railways and airports. Waverley Station's a mixed bag. My assistance, which had been booked, didn't make an appearance, but I managed to capture a member of staff to help me to my distant carriage. Edinburgh Airport has its assisted passenger desk, but that's well away from the entrance, so you have to struggle there to be allocated the most basic of a wheelchair, which feels as if you and it will part company quite easily. At the gates, you wait very conspicuously with others for your rickety transport to be placed on a lorry-like platform, which raises you up like a wheelie bin onto an even more rickety vehicle, then deposits you on the plane. You are, of course, last to come off, and I had to wait for some time at Halifax Airport, Nova Scotia, when I was offloaded and abandoned, waiting for some poor soul to locate me and deposit me at customs. It's all a bit rough and ready and undignified unless you're prepared to see the funny side of it. My walking stick was suspiciously and scrupulously examined at customs in Canada on account of it having a place for a light at the end. The whole shebang took so long my poor family, complete with "Welcome Granny Scotland" banners, had to wait 45 minutes when I appeared, now with walking stick, to all but an empty airport foyer. But there are kindnesses offering you help, even if you're trying to do for yourself, like lifting your luggage onto the rack. On balance, these so far have outweighed the lack of consideration. For accessibility, there's much needing improvement because too often there are only stairs, so there's no access at all. So I say to the member, I thank her for this debate. There are, of course, far more serious obstacles than I've met, but even having this recent but permanent taste of simply achieving, getting from here to there, of maintaining your dignity and, importantly, your individuality, has been a lesson for this politician, and I'm still learning. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Graham. And I now call on Minister Colcap-Stewart to respond to the debate. Up to 7 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and I'd like to thank all members for your thoughtful contributions today, and of course I pay tribute to Pam Duncan-Glancy for lodging this very important motion, and of course it shows our shared commitment to equality and inclusion. I will try and refer to as many points as possible, but as usual it's a wide variety. If there is anything that I don't mention, I am quite happy for people to follow that up with me. Can I also take a moment to acknowledge the loss of two remarkable individuals, one of whom, Etienne d'Auberville, has been mentioned and remembered by Pam Duncan-Glancy. I'd also like to pay tribute to Alan Dick as well. Both were very powerful and dedicated advocates for independent living and tireless champions for disabled people's rights. And we honour their legacy, and of course I extend our condolences to all who knew them and to those who love them. It gives us that reason to keep going. They were fighting, and I see that Pam Duncan-Glancy is carrying on that fight. She spoke of her accomplishment of being the first permanent wheelchair user to be elected to this Parliament, and from a personal point of view, being also a first woman of colour to be elected to this Parliament. I know that Pam and I will both make sure that we are not the last, and we are not ones that will pull up the ladder behind us. In fact, I would say that we are both ones that would get rid of that ladder in the first place. But in the meantime, I will highlight the Access to Elected Office Fund, which opened again on the 6th of May. It originally started as a pilot in 2017, and it does provide practical and financial support. That is now, of course, on a statutory footing through the Scottish Elections Representation Reform Act of 2025. And of course, it goes without saying, it doesn't help with any political messaging. It just provides the practical support. And so far, that fund has helped over 100 candidates, disabled candidates, who have stood for election. So, moving on to Fair Work, there were comments around that. Our ambition is to at least halve the disability employment gap by 2038. And I just wanted to point out that the estimated disability employment rate gap has typically decreased from 37.4 percentage points. That was taken between January to December in 2016, compared to 31.5 in the January to December 2024, and that's from the Office of National Statistic records. Now, clearly that is still too high, and there are challenges there that we will address, but we are making progress in that area. Moving on to, I think, accessible transport was also mentioned, and that vision that disabled people can travel with the same freedom and choice and dignity and opportunity as other citizens. So, launched in 2016, the Accessible Travel Framework was co-produced with disabled people, and it was a 10-year plan. The 2024 to 26 delivery plan covers delivery for the final 2 years of that framework, and work on that is progressing. There are regular consultations with representatives from disabled people's organisations to hear about what more can be done. And I was very pleased to actually launch the pilot of giving concessionary travel to companions of those who are blind and visually impaired when they're travelling on public transport as well. So that was, again, a further achievement. Since the UN's designated the 3rd of December, tomorrow, in fact, as International Day of Persons with Disabilities in 1992, the aim has been clear: to champion the rights of disabled people and ensure full participation in every aspect of life. And we know that the barriers still remain in education, employment, transport, public services, leaving too many at risk of poverty and exclusion. I do hear the points that were made by Jeremy Balfour in particular, and whilst I understand and share his concerns about not being able to move fast enough in his view, but I don't agree with the narrative that he painted completely. I engage absolutely fully with the disabled people's organisations. I launched the Improving Access Fund, which, 1.5 million was a significant sort of financial contribution to that. That was very warmly welcomed by the disabled people's organisations, because again, it's practical help that will actually assist people in their daily lives. So this year's theme, Fostering Disability Inclusive Societies for Social Progress, means that equality is not optional. We know that it's essential to tackling poverty and building a fairer Scotland. And participation is the foundation of progress. We want to make sure that the Disability Equality Plan, which was co-designed, it has focus on 3 priorities: strengthening financial security, bolstering inclusive participation and improving mental health and well-being. I'm mindful of my time. I will finish up on saying that we are also embedding disability competence across the government, so policies are not only designed for disabled people but shaped with them, making inclusion a starting point. So, Presiding Officer, a fairer Scotland is only possible when equal rights are secured for everyone. It requires more than this debate, I know that. It requires more than good intentions, I know that. It demands action, determination and a shared responsibility. So together we will continue to dismantle the barriers and build a Scotland where equality is lived and not just imagined. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. That concludes the debate and I close this meeting.